This video is going to be a little bit different from what I normally do. If you visit our website or subscribe to this channel, you'll recognize that this is just a far more personal story than anything I normally do. Even when I've been personal in articles and videos in the past, I've linked it to travel or culture or books in some way. This, not so much. But I hope it's still helpful, I hope it's still informative, I hope it's still useful to someone, because if I've learned anything from the internet, pop culture, literature, travel, etc., it's that exposure and representation is really important. So I want to talk about me for a bit. However, for the sake of being on brand and consistency, here are some books, and here's a bow. It's real hot. And spicy veg. Alright, so when I was a teenager, I grew up on punk rock music. I can pretty much blame Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for that. I grew up with punk. When I was at university, from 2008 to 2011, I was really into a band from Florida called Against Me. In 2012, the singer of that band transitioned. She came out as transgender, and she became known as Laura Jane Grace. Laura Jane Grace immediately became something else to me than what she was previously. Before that, she was a punk rock icon. Suddenly now she was a punk rock icon and a queer icon, a transgender icon. And I was 22 at the time. I didn't know anything about trans people other than they existed. I didn't know anything about transgender culture, I didn't really think about gender all that much, but something about her transitioning and her being someone I was already a fan of, someone who I had admired and seen perform live and kind of fixated on a little bit, suddenly this triggered some sort of dysphoria in me. Again, I didn't really understand dysphoria. Thankfully, fast forward only a few months to 2013, and Laura Jane Grace and her band Against Me bring out the album Transgender Dysphoria Blues. Transgender Dysphoria Blues, the lyrics, the interviews that she did about it, the interviews she did about her transition, the book that she brought out, all of these things helped me understand a world that I didn't know anything about, a world that I was suddenly pretty obsessed with. Suddenly, I was obsessed with trans rights and trans representation. And I felt a little bit of confusion, personal gender confusion, gender dysphoria, but I was pretty sure that I wasn't trans, that I was okay with the genitals that I had, the body that I had. I was pretty okay with it, but there was something going on inside me. I like bow. It's 2016 now. I'm 26, and I'm living and working in Tokyo. One day, a friend/colleague and I are walking home together from the university that we worked at. And she and I are talking about non-binary people. We're talking about something that, again, I'd only really just seen in a few headlines. There was something about Obama and a trans person in the UK while he was visiting. I can't remember the details. But I suddenly had this thing thrust upon me that I, again, knew nothing about. I'd spent several years becoming a fan of several transgender activists, trans celebrities, singers, songwriters, actors, whatever. I was very intensely interested in the transgender world, the trans community, but again, still pretty happy in my cisgender male body. And then this whole non-binary thing, I remember, and I'm opening myself up to ridicule and shame here, but I remember specifically we were walking home from the station to the apartment block that we lived in, and I turned to Amanda and I said to her that I didn't really understand this non-binary thing. I understand being transgender, I understand the fairly kind of outdated and awkward thing of being born in the wrong body, which Philosophy Tube recently brought up as kind of an awkward, old-fashioned thing. I think it was Philosophy Tube. Oh no, maybe it was ContraPoints. Anyway, someone brought it up. Point is, I understood the concept of being transgender, I understood dysphoria, I understood that I had dysphoria, and but I still thought that being non-binary was silly. I was like, you can't be in between the genders, there are two, and if you want to transition, great. If you feel like you are trans, if you feel like you were born in the wrong body, etc., fine. I love trans people, I love the trans community, but non-binary? What's all that about? That doesn't make sense to me. That's what I thought when I was, 25, 26? That's what I thought. Not realizing that this was a thing that I was dismissing. That was pretty much the answer to all of my problems. As a kid, because I live in the world, I was very much affected by gender stereotypes, gender alignment things that were and weren't okay or allowed or encouraged, depending on the gender that you were born into or ascribed. Is ascribed a word? I think that's the word I'm looking for. A gender label that was slapped on you. Whatever. I remember as a kid, I would like a lot of feminine things that girls liked. When I was in school, my best friend, who's gay, would tell me to watch Buffy. Or he'd tell me to watch Sailor Moon or something relatively feminine. And I would go ahead and watch it and think, wow, this is the best thing ever. This is fantastic. I love this. And then I thought, well, he's gay. He wasn't out at the time, but I knew he was gay. And I thought, well, he's gay. He's allowed to watch these things. I can't tell anyone that I like Buffy and Sailor Moon, so I won't. And then life goes on and you start to ask very, very simple questions like, why can women wear trousers and I can't wear a skirt? And then you kind of go, it's not important. Don't worry about that. No matter, it's just the way it is. Yeah. And then I was at university one day and a friend of mine said, I'd bought myself a brown leather jacket, and he said, girls wear brown leather jackets and boys wear black ones. To this day, I don't know where he got that from, but I remember thinking, cool, okay, great, I'll wear the brown one. And these are thoughts that would just kind of pop into my head like fireworks here and there and didn't really mean anything. And as life goes on, you kind of dwell on these things more and more. Maybe you bring them up to a psychiatrist or a therapist. Maybe. Maybe you don't. Maybe it doesn't mean anything to you. But they were things that I've thought about a lot over the years. So after the Tokyo incident where I was talking to my friend and I dismissed the idea of non-binary people through some prejudice that I had decided to have very suddenly and naively. You move forward about a year and a half, and I'm living in Seoul. I'm 27, I think. I'm living in Seoul. And I cannot for the life of me tell you where this came from. But one day, one of my students, who was 12, 13-year-old kid, turned to me and I must have said something feminine, admitted to liking something or doing something that was particularly girlish. And this student laughed and said to me, but teacher, you're a man. And I do not know what prompted me to say this, but I turned to them and I said, well, sometimes. What does that mean? Why? I don't know why I said it. I don't know what prompted it, but I said it. And I remember saying it again the next time a student said that to me, because kids are, I guess, more obsessed with gender and aligning themselves correctly. Not to say adults aren't, Jesus Christ. So I don't know where this came from. I don't know why I said it. But it was something that then kind of snowballed within my mind and through my words. And over the last 2-3 years, I have unconsciously, subconsciously, and then consciously developed a sort of obsession, personal exploration journey with gender fluidity and cultivating or discovering or understanding a non-binary identity. And there have been things that have specifically helped me. A lot of YouTubers like Thought Slime. And becoming friends with non-binary people or people who are also confused about their gender identity and wondering if they are non-binary, wondering if they want to go by certain pronouns. And this has been a really exciting journey for me, and it's something that is still ongoing. I think maybe it'll always be going, I don't know. But about 6 months ago, I made a video on this channel where I just talked about the effect that a book had on me. The book in question was Women Don't Owe You Pretty by Florence Given. This was a very, very big deal in 2020. This book was huge, especially on Instagram, where Florence Given is a pretty massive Instagram influencer. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about Florence Given, the person. I'm not sure. A lot of things have come out that make me a bit uncomfortable, and also she's clearly very, very rich, and that makes me itchy. But that book still had a huge effect on me. And during the video, I mentioned that I was something. I was about to say, if I remember rightly, I was about to say that I was, a cisgender straight white man. And then I kind of stopped myself, and I remember, I don't know, I haven't watched the video in forever, but I remember saying that I'm not really sure what I am. Since making that video, I've mentioned in a few videos more confidently and comfortably that I am non-binary. And that feels really, really great. And I'm still investigating this, and I am still trying to figure out the rules because, I don't know, finding out that you fall into a specific community of people still comes with questions and things you're trying to understand and rules that you're trying to figure out. And one of them for me was pronouns. Pronouns have been made fun of for years by terrible people. And it's I guess this is the thing that prompted me wanting to make this video, was slowly coming to grips with pronouns a little bit more. Recently, one of my idols, the video games pundit turned angry socialist soapbox speaker Jim Sterling. Jim Sterling has been a hero of mine for like 10 years. They recently came out as non-binary. And they are like 10 years older than me, and that was a really, really big deal for me because I felt like I was kind of going on this journey a little bit with Jim. And obviously, that's not true. I don't know Jim personally, but Jim's journey has helped me along on my journey a little bit. And with them coming out as non-binary and using they, them pronouns, the pronoun thing finally started to click with me a little bit more because I've never really had an issue with he, him pronouns. What I've always had an issue with is being labeled a man or a boy or male. These words carry a lot of weight for me. They make me uncomfortable. They make me anxious. I don't like them. I do not like being called a man. I don't know if I want to be so publicly awkward as to tell people that they've pronouned me wrong, and I'm not speaking for all non-binary people. I just don't really want to cause a fuss. If people he, him me, that's fine. My partner does every day. I don't like telling people not to when I'm not too bothered by it. What I am bothered by is man or male. If people call me a man or a guy or a bloke, I do feel triggered. I do feel kind of anxious and upset. I do cringe a little bit. And I probably would now say something and say, well, I'm not a man. I don't feel like a man. Please don't call me a man. Masculinity frightens me. And as time goes on, I do feel a little bit more uncomfortable because I'm understanding myself better. I feel a little bit more uncomfortable with how deep my voice is or any stereotypically masculine traits. I have anxiety, and anxiety has caused a lot of anger issues. I feel a lot of anger a lot of the time. I've been struggling with anger issues for 5-6 years. I don't like that. Anger is a traditionally or stereotypically masculine trait, which in itself is a problem. Masculinity being tied up with anger is a thing that we need to discuss. It's an issue about masculinity. It's an issue about anger. You can talk about how that means that women aren't allowed to get angry, or it's not proper for a woman to feel anger or aggression or malice or any of these loud and dangerous kind of traits, but also to ascribe that to a masculine or male thing means that you're putting certain expectations on men to be angry or masculine, or giving men a free pass if they behave in an angry way. I've gone on a tangent now. This is a thing I think about a lot. But for me personally, I don't like it. I feel ashamed of my masculinity. People might tell me to get over it. People might tell me to just man up or butch up or something. No, thank you. I really don't want to do that. So my issue comes with being called a man or a boy or male, not so much with he and him. I don't mind that. So I don't know what the rules are for everyone. I don't know if I'm doing it right, but for me, I don't mind being called he, and I really kind of love being called she, and I do feel a certain amount of acknowledgement. I feel seen if I ever am they, them'd, which has happened to me a few times on Twitter. I was mistaken for a woman in Tesco recently because I was wearing very feminine clothes and I wear heels now. And this is fun, it feels great. But as I've said, at this moment, he, him still doesn't really bother me. This might change. I'll probably do another video because this is my ongoing non-binary journey, and it will always be ongoing. I might look back at this in a year, 2 years and think, yeah, they were still figuring themselves out. What's helped me appreciate and understand a little bit the they, them pronouns was when I read Mordu, fantasy novel. I made a video on Mordu a few months ago when I read it. It's a great novel by Alex Feby. And in that book is a non-binary character, but they are not non-binary in a traditional sense. They are fantastically non-binary, if you like. They are boy-girl twins that exist in the same body. And so they are they-them'd all the way through the book. And this really helped me understand the idea that as a non-binary person, if you are non-binary, I at least kind of do feel like I have a man and a woman inside of me. I do feel that I shift between the masculine, the feminine, the male, the female, whatever. I do feel that. Reading this book really, really helped me because representation is really important and it saves lives and it helps us. So reading about a non-binary character who is literally a male and a female in one body, reading their story and reading about their character helped me understand myself a little bit more. And I thought, yeah, that is the beauty of they, them pronouns, is that they, them are a gender. They are without gender. But they are also inclusive because they is typically used as a plural for a group of people. And so I do kind of feel like a group of people. The idea of they, them being inclusive as a group pronoun is really, really useful for me, because now it makes me feel like, yeah, I do have two people inside of me, therefore I am they. I kind of love that. So somewhere I went from being someone very passionate about the trans community and trans people and trans rights to someone who was instinctively prejudiced against non-binary people and the concept of being non-binary, to someone who suddenly understood it without ever saying so. The moment, as I said, the moment where I corrected a student and said that I am a man sometimes, wherever that came from, it changed everything for me, and it got me to understand myself much more deeply. And it started this journey. So for 2.5, 3 years now, I've been on this journey trying to understand my gender identity, or lack thereof, or inclusion of multiple gender identities. The idea of being non-binary, of floating around in a gender space, is really exciting. And it clears up a lot of confusion that I've had when it comes to my sexuality. I am exclusively into women. I have never been with a man, I am not interested in men, and yet I feel queer. It makes a lot of sense to me now. Being in the queer community a little bit more, with a partner who is queer, with friends who are queer, and understanding that queer is a much broader spectrum than I ever understood. That's why it's LGBT plus, or LGBTQ, or queer. It's really important, and I just feel like I kind of found myself a little bit more. But I am still finding myself. This is still an ongoing journey. So this is probably the first video of several videos that I'll make about myself. But if you are struggling with your gender identity, if you're confused by what you want when it comes to pronouns or how people address you, if you're confused about your gender and wondering where your gender is growing into, or your lack of gender, or your multiple genders, however you see it, it's actually a pretty exciting thing, and I feel like I'm trying to follow a set group of rules when I really shouldn't have to. I saw a comic, I can't remember what it was a comic strip that I saw on Instagram, some non-binary Instagram comic artist person, you know the ones. They had a comic that was like, oh, so you're non-binary, you don't look particularly androgynous. They say, I have a card, I have a non-binary card, and then the non-binary card says something like, I do what I want. And I was like, thank God, I can just do what I want. Because as I started to feel like I was part of the non-binary community, I was like, well, surely I have to follow certain rules now. And it has helped me a little bit. I wear a lot more nail varnish, although I've been doing that for years, but now I wear different colours. And I wear heels now, and I like heels, and I wear my partner's clothes, and I shop in the women's section. And these things have just helped me feel a little bit more free, and a little bit more comfortable, a little less restricted by societal expectations, gender norms, whatever. It's a nice journey that I've gone on. I don't know what sparked it exactly, other than perhaps the freedom to know that I could. That was a big deal. So, I am non-binary. It feels wonderful to say that. Right. Normally I would say subscribe for books, and that's still true, but just subscribe if you fancy it.